peas, something later.
Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of the New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left. What's up, Big Neil?
It's the good word, Lance. We are in the thick of the season, right? We're coming off the league meetings where Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin spoke. Over the last 2 days, we got a little bit of information, some clarity on a few free agency moves, as well as maybe a tease or two about what the Steelers are looking to do with the remaining portions of free agency, which is going to run straight through the start of training camp, as well as next month's draft. One position in particular that he spoke about, we're going to dive into here on the New Standard. Thank you all for being here. Let's get to it, Lance.
Yeah, and as always, if you want to join us, we're going a little early today at 6:50 an odd time, but typically we air at 7:15 a.m. every Wednesday. You can catch us on YouTube. Go do a search for Lance Williams or Neil Coulong and the New Standard, and also do a search for the New Standard where you find your podcast. I wasn't privy to the comments from Coach Tomlin. I understand Coach Tomlin is making those comments, I guess, live right now. And big up to Wes and everybody that's joining us on the program. And that kind of sparked a little conversation between you and Wes. And Wes asked the following question. I wanted you to jump into it on the show and share your thoughts with everyone else. And Wes asked the following question. When you guys get rolling, maybe you can help me understand comments made by about our free agency by Mike Tomlin. I believe where he said they were hoping to add Holcomb or Roberts. And we were talking a little bit off air about that move and just illustrate what you were saying in the comments.
Generally speaking, I did not hear his particular quote in regards to that. But if most of the time, when you want to see a team's priority or what a team is trying to do, it's just the cliche, follow the money. Very simply, they paid Cole Holcomb $18 million over 3 seasons. They paid him a starter's contract. They gave Elandon Roberts a backup veteran contract. I don't remember, and I'm going to guess just based on the comment. Apparently, what's being suggested here is that Roberts was signed before Holcomb was. It's a fluid thing. I don't know if we can accurately say just because it may have been reported first that that's what their intention was. It might have been just, look, we're going to go after, think of it like this. Sorry, I'm all over the board here. Think of it like this. They don't necessarily look at players first and then assign them value in terms of dollars in the free agency market. Most often what teams do is they look to budget how much they want to spend and how many players they want to bring in at each position. They do the same thing with the draft. It's not the linear model that everybody wants you to think that it is. Like they have a board that ranks everybody in one vertical column, 1 through 355. You can't make decisions that way. Lance, you and I have had this conversation a bunch on this show. You with a computer programming background know that that's not how decisions are made. You have to group it into smaller and smaller terms to get what you ultimately want. Within free agency, it's not a whole lot different than that. They're putting a dollar amount of what they want to spend. And in this case, we have the solution that they're trying to get to. Miles Jack's contract was worth $8 million. What they're probably looking at is, can we improve on Miles Jack for at or around lower than hopefully $8 million? In this case, they found options within the market that enabled them to do that. The addition of 2 of them, which they did with Holcomb and Roberts, gives them a little bit more veteran flexibility at, plus or minus a few bucks, the same cost as Jack. If anything, in fact, it's probably lower this year than it would have been with Jack. So they got 2 players for the price of, granted, it's a fairly high price for Jack that he couldn't have been reasonably expected to get, but they weren't going to release Jack until they had all this lined up. So really what they're doing is they brought in the starter in Holcomb. They're paying him like a starter would get. and they brought in Roberts probably more as depth. And the point that I made in the comments here, and everybody should weigh in on this if you're able to do so. Roberts could probably, and I'm not guaranteeing this, but probably be seen at this point in his career as a backup and a special teams player. The Steelers loaded up on special teams talent last year. They had a lot of guys who were being paid roughly market for special teams contributions. They kept Derek Watt, which I didn't expect them to do. Miles Boykin was brought in at a really high price for a wide receiver who's only going to play special teams. They have not brought either of those players back at this point. At the time of recording, neither of them have been signed. We also know that former Steelers special teams guy turned Bills special teams ace, Tyler Matakevich, signed another extension with the Bills for approximately, I think it was $3.5 million a year, maybe $4 million. That's the going rate for a high-end special teams player, which is what the Bills value Matakevich at. So you can reasonably suspect that's the market that Watt and Boykin would be looking for. It's pretty high. Do they want to pay that? I don't know. But maybe Roberts is the guy they're looking to help fill one of those roles. And they're getting him at like $1 million, 1.3, something like that. And they add to linebacker depth that they probably needed. It was a position that we discussed often. It's something they may want to look into the draft. I think with the signing of these two players suggests they're probably not going to continue to allow Mark Robinson to develop. And I'm scrambling mad here to find the name of it. They signed, somebody help me out. They signed a reasonably young free agent linebacker during last season. He is still on the roster. If somebody could tell me who that is, I would appreciate it. Maybe that's who they want to roll with. But I think play-wise, you're probably going to get an upgrade with Holcomb over Jack. What you want to do with Devin Bush's position, I think, is up in the air. There are a couple different options that you have there. So nowadays, specialized defense, your two inside linebackers are going to contribute. They're going to be on the field, but you can move guys around with that other linebacker position. Is that a spot on the field, not physically, but within a package that another safety can fill. And that's where Mike Tomlin's comments from yesterday at the league meetings comes into play. He said in no uncertain terms, the free agency process is still ongoing. We're going to add to the safety position, certainly. There are some credible candidates in both free agency and the draft. This is a team that let Terrell Edmunds go in free agency, if we want to call it that, because Edmunds signed a 2-year, $2 million deal with the Eagles for $600,000 guaranteed. It's hard for the Steelers to have bid less than that. That's about bottom basement for a veteran like Edmunds. That's not a very high price tag. I would suggest the Steelers offered something close to that. Edmunds wasn't interested in continuing his time in Pittsburgh. Maybe that's the role that they wanted him to play. I don't know. They can play a 3-safety look and take one of those linebackers off the field, play the safety closer to the line. They have options is really the point. And the more bodies they have with NFL experience, the more options they're going to have. So Tomlin, though, strongly suggested they are in the market for a safety still yet this free agency period and possibly in the draft as well. So I think all these things are tied together is what I'm saying. And I think Holcomb is going to be, as people would say to annoy me, the green dot guy as far as the linebackers are concerned. He's the one that's going to play the most amount of snaps. I'm not 100% sure if maybe Roberts is the starter. Maybe Robinson's the starter. Maybe they don't have the starter yet. Maybe
I was going to ask you that next.
If they want to play two inside linebackers, maybe they aren't 100% sure who that's going to be, or maybe the plan is they're going to use 2 or 3 of them. We don't know. It's up in the air, but versatility is the key thing in today's defense. You need depth. I would not be surprised to see them sign a veteran safety in, I hate to say this, conjure up a lot of bad memories, but that Mark Barron sort of role, the safety playing at the line to provide run support in a coverage role as well. I would think that's a piece that they might want to add. Maybe that is in the draft. Maybe it is a veteran. I don't know. We'll see. I think that they have a lot of options. They don't need to have these things sorted out in March. They're not going to lock anything down until training camp anyway. So a lot of time left. A lot of things can happen.
Big up to Double H. Thank you for the contribution in the super chat. Again, if you want to participate via super chat, please do that. Not begging for it, not asking you for it, but we do appreciate it when we get it. So thank you for the super chat. Also, please like and subscribe to the program. Now, you dove into a lot there, Neil, and it kind of all kind of blends together in the sense that one of the big things that occurred, obviously, was Terrell Edmunds signing with the Philadelphia Eagles. That was one of the big things that occurred. And the way that works into the defense and these two free agents in Holcomb and Roberts and sub-package football, it's going to be very interesting. And not to shift too far away from Holcomb and Roberts in the discussion, the main topic of the show, are the Steelers, or is the loss of Ryan Shazier still being impactful for the Steelers? And it's interesting that you brought up the name Mark Barron, because I almost slipped and forgot about that name totally.
I don't know how you could forget about that guy.
And Mark Barron,
like the least successful Steelers player ever.
And
nothing worked when he was involved.
And he figures into this prominently when you talk about the backers and you talk about Edmunds and you talk about these signings and this. And I think the Steelers are still in a place where they're trying to replace the loss of Ryan Shazier. We've seen that with the drafting of Devin Bush, and I'm going to name some names. But before that, I want to give you guys a little details on Cole Holcomb's deal. Cole Holcomb, in terms of a cap charge, counts for this year $2.7 million on the cap, has a base salary of about $1 million. This proration is 1.6. So if you add those two together, you get his cap charge, and he is on a 3-year deal. You look at Elandon Roberts' deal, his cap charge this year is $2.3 million, which is approximately, it's about 1% of the cap. And he signed a 2-year deal. He signed through 2024. And it's going to be interesting.
So they gave Elandon Roberts more than what Terrell Edmunds got from the Eagles. Just pointing that out to people.
Yeah, which is very interesting. And Omar Khan made some comments that they wanted to retain Edmunds, but he wanted to go to Philadelphia. You never know if those statements are true. Those are just statements. I would take them with a grain of salt because we're not privy to those discussions. But the interesting thing is, in this discussion about Ryan Shazier's loss impacting the Steelers, let me list some names. John Bostic, Vince Williams,
Johnny Bostic,
Devin Bush, who was a first-round draft pick who they gave up significant draft capital to acquire.
Roberts, now making $10 an hour in Seattle.
Robert Spillane, Joe Schobert. How about Joe Schobert? Rainbow Schobert.
Another complete bust.
Mark Barron is another name. Miles Jack. We got Robinson, and now we've got Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts. You throw all those names into a bunch, you have some solid guys, but you got guys. And the Steelers clearly demonstrated how important Ryan Shazier was, what they were trying to do in modern defense by trying to go back out and replace that player in the first round again with a Devin Bush. And I think we're still seeing it right now in this defense, is that they haven't had that presence at the inside linebacker position since his loss. And going back to something that you said in terms of value that the Steelers put on players, it's sort of like how, you budget, hopefully you budget and everyone else budgets. When you want to do certain things, you don't pick the product first. Typically, you kind of allocate what you got to spend to get the product, and then you shop for the product. So the Steelers said, this is how much we want to allocate towards it. And here are the players that kind of fit that, and we're going to figure it out. But Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts are still part of this everlasting, never-ending search to replace Ryan Shazier. Now, I don't know how much you know about Cole Holcomb or Elandon Roberts as players, Neil, and I'm sure you've asked around about those guys, but they just feel like guys. when I looked at Cole Holcomb, and I know I commented to you that I watched like 3 or 4 games, and he doesn't make plays. Like he's a snap guy. Like he's a guy that, I mean, you got to have somebody play the snaps. He's athletic. I think he's a better athlete than Spillane. I think he can run. He has some juice. He's a guy that's sort of around the ball, but not around the ball. He's just a snap. He looked very much like a snap filler to me. Like he's a guy that's not a star, but you need to play. You need somebody to take the snaps. He just feels like a body. And let me give you guys some rankings. And of course, this is just PFF, and take it with a grain of salt. But here are some of the PFF rankings for Holcomb. Overall, he ranked as the 58th linebacker. In terms of run defense, he was ranked 51st. In terms of pass rush, he was ranked 150th. And that's one thing that Elandon Roberts did very well at the inside linebacker position. He led the NFL with 5 sacks. So that's something to think about in terms of how he might be utilized, his ability to get pressure on the quarterback. In terms of coverage, Holcomb was 45th. Passer rating allowed 140.2, 177. Yards per reception, 10.3, ranked 129. And no sacks. So I don't know what all that means, but I throw all those numbers out to say that pretty much what he signed for is what you could pretty much expect. And I don't know if the acquisition of Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts solves the problem. We'll see. But I still think very much that the loss of Ryan Shazier is still impacting the Steelers.
I think it's on the surface, really, it's apples and oranges. I mean, you can't. They invested a top 15 pick in Ryan Shazier. They invested a few dollars on the retail market for something called Cole Holcomb, who incidentally was a 5th round draft pick the year they took Devin Bush. They tried the expensive premium route with linebackers in 2014 and 2019, and they don't have either of them beyond their rookie contracts. One for terrible reasons, and the other because he just isn't a player.
He can't play.
To replace that would require them to logically invest premium capital, whether that's money or draft picks. They haven't done that. So it's hard to say logically that they haven't replaced them. They haven't found anybody that can play. Here's what it comes down to, in my mind. The premium we're talking about is playmaking ability and its pass coverage. I'm not sure how good, kind of like you alluded to, how good Cole Holcomb is going to be in that regard. I don't know. We'll see. But nothing in his career really suggests he's that type of guy. Is he an A-gap blitzer? That's another key piece that you mentioned. Vince Williams, who was excellent in that capacity, run blitzing in particular. Big dude, contact courage through the roof. Spillane wasn't quite athletic enough to fill that sort of role, but he'd get in there for sure. He's going to bang somebody. I felt Devin Bush did a good job with that last season. I think, if anything, they see Holcomb as being able to do that, which is basically an A-gap run blitz. Is you're pounding the gap, not looking to get in after the quarterback, but to hit the line of scrimmage and control it, to try to control the run game. You expect a run. That's a run blitz, simple to figure out. I think Holcomb, based on I haven't really dug into him, but just the film that I've seen, he looks like the type that could play and wants to play that style of football. That fits the Steelers well. An every down player, probably, just because, typically that's what they've done. I don't think they're going to take a linebacker off the field. So I'd imagine it would be him. But if you're expecting him to be able to drop and carry tight ends 15 to 18 down the field, not sure he's your guy. I'm not sure how many of those there are of those in the NFL. And typically when you get those, they're premium. They expected Devin Bush to grow into that role. He never did. Shazier would have been the best in the game at it easily. The improvement that he made year after year, they were going to give him a long-term extension. He probably would have been at the end of that now, but he would have been able to fill that role. They're not looking to fill that role, though, with Cole Holcomb. At least I hope not. If they are, then they're in trouble. Not to repeat the same thing, but I think this is why they're positioned, and Tomlin really alluded to that when he was speaking, to find another safety. And I think that safety is going to be in the mold of those hybrids that they've brought in the past. I hate to say this, but Morgan Burnett, Mark Barron, guys
Morgan
that they vets who were obvious liabilities on day one, to come in and handle kind of a linebacker off ball, over the top of a split tight end, that sort of role. That's what they want. They want to be able to stay as heavy as they can while still covering in sub packages. So it's a nickel with one of your safeties being playing a linebacker type of position. This is something they did with Troy Polamalu back in 2013 when Larry Foote was hurt. They brought in Robert Golden as an undrafted free agent in the hopes that he could build to that. A versatile defensive back in college. He added weight. He ended up being a great special teams player, but that role never really materialized. They haven't really done much as far as trying to fill that, except giving us plenty of highlights of watching Mark Barron chase guys all over the field. You know, I'm not sure if that role is really all that possible in the NFL, but they're trying. Unless you've got Derwin James, if you want to invest a top 15 pick, top 16 pick in a player like that, you could probably get away with it. But where they are right now, they're not. They gave Holcomb a 3-year deal, not a 5-year deal. It's not largely guaranteed. They're not going to ask him to do those kinds of things. So I don't know. And as James brought up here, it's a new linebackers coach as well. That deserves to be mentioned. Perhaps a different look. Perhaps they brought in the new linebackers coach because they want their inside linebackers doing something differently than what they were doing previously. And that's not a shot against Jerry O or anything. It's just Jerry O teaches them to do A, B, and C. Now they want them to do D, E, and F. They need to bring in somebody who can do D, E, and F. And that might not be Jerry O. So I think that is connected to it as well. We'll see. I don't see a heavily dynamic player in Holcomb. I see a solid NFL linebacker, but not a real versatile one. To me, I think the telegraph move the Steelers are making here is they're not done at safety, and that's what Tomlin spoke to the other day. I think they still have a move yet to make. He mentioned there are guys out there that they're still looking at. I don't think they're done yet. It's not going to be a high caliber guy, but it could be somebody they're looking to use very specifically.
Yeah, I might be the one person, or me and you might be the two people that were relatively high on Terrell Edmunds. His versatility, what he brought to the defense, his durability. You're talking about a player over his tenure with the Steelers. I'm going to say probably played close to 4,500 snaps plus.
Yeah, that's fair.
And when you're talking about replacing a player, you're talking about replacing his production, but you're also talking about replacing his snaps. And I think with these moves, I think you astutely have pointed out, I think it illustrates there's another piece that has it. There's another move or another piece that's not in play, that's not in place. Because when you look at Big Nickel, the times in when they played Edmunds, Minka, and KZ, it looked pretty good. It was a nice safety tandem. And we saw the impact of Edmunds and Minka and the different things that Edmunds was able to do to free Minka to play in the role that he played. So there's still a move out there, I think, that still needs to be made. Do you think these transactions, the loss of Edmunds brings safety into play in the first round? Do you think the signings of Holcomb and Roberts takes linebacker, if it was on the possibility in the first round, out of the mix as a position group for the first round?
I don't think they're going to value the linebacker position in terms of a high frequency contributor more than they have right now. That is not to say they won't invest in one. Mark Robinson, I would be really curious to get the team's honest thoughts on his performance when he played. He did some things that really made you excited about his development, and he did some things that were just like, okay, he can't. Yeah, I don't know if he's ready to be on the field as often as we might like him to be right now. That said, I just, with the way that they have built their team, from a coaching perspective, from a strategic perspective, I really feel like safety is more of their priority. Defensive back is more of their priority. Because of that, I would not be surprised if they used a premium pick on a player like that, a player who can play inside and out, over the top. Tomlin even spoke to this as well. It's not free versus strong anymore. It's positions. It's where they line up. They're not lining up based on what the offense is showing, which is what free and strong would really mean. Strong safety being the guy that lines up on the strong side of the field. Teams, the technical strong side is on the bunch side of a formation, and that might not be the strength of what they're doing. Your strong safety, unless he's in coverage on the bunch side, it doesn't really matter that it's strong. They're not in a run formation. So that, I think that nomenclature is pretty much gone. They have two safety positions. You may as well call it left and right. On the Steelers, schematically, what they're doing is putting Minkah in the middle of the field. So it's almost as if they've got 4 defensive backs and one that's over the top. So how you line those 4 up is relative to what the offense is doing. And because of that, that's value. That's really 2 cornerbacks to something else. Do you call them cornerbacks? Do you call them slot defenders? I don't know what the name is, but there are 4 other defensive backs who are going to play a lot of snaps alongside, or I should say in front of, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's going to play every snap that he's available to play. So do they have enough depth at that right now? Do they have enough versatility to do the things that they want to do with that kind of package in mind? I don't necessarily think that they are. I think, we can argue all day about cornerback. You signed KZ, Trey Norwood is still there. Miles Killebrew is the vet reserve, kind of more special teams guy. 4 safeties with Minkah. I think there's another one there. I think they won another one. And to be honest, maybe not. I could make the argument that type of position, especially if it's a cornerback who can play inside, he can defend a slot guy, I'd argue that is overall going to be more valuable to the team than just your quintessential outside cornerback, especially considering the outside cornerback position, that prime shutdown cornerback, or whatever bullshit term people use for that. It's extremely hard to find, and it does not last long. It's extremely difficult to stay at that level for a long time. In fact, many of them don't develop into that until a couple of years. People want to put the standard at Jalen Ramsey. It's like, Jalen Ramsey is 6'1". He's an elite athlete with the mirror skills of a high-level guy and the mobility skills of a guy that's considerably smaller than he is. He's not normal. That's why he gets drafted in the top 5.
And he's freakishly long.
And now you have to pay premium to get him on your team in terms of acquiring him with capital and then paying him. The Dolphins are going to pay him $20 million to play 3 different positions. He is highly valuable. You're not finding that at 17 overall. If you are, it's something you're going to develop over time. Not to say there aren't good ones. I'm just saying the odds are not great. Safety, though, is not a position that is highly desired at that point in the draft. Safeties are not going in the top 5. Minkah Fitzpatrick is arguably the best safety who's been drafted in the last 5-6 years. You can make the argument. Not saying he is. You can make the argument. Where did he go? 12 overall, and he got traded after a year. So it's an evolving position. In my mind, this is the way every team. I'm totally segueing off everything here, Lance. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
If you look at every team that has been highly competitive to 2+ Super Bowl appearances, at least, if not wins, that base a lot of what they do on their defense. If you look at those teams, the one commonality they all have is the capitalization of market inefficiency. The best way I can describe this is the Cowher days of the Steelers' history. They were one of like 3 teams that ran a 3-4. The pure 3-4, which we don't see anymore. Doesn't exist. Everybody is hybrid. A large part of that is evolution. Few teams were doing what the Steelers were doing. So what they were able to do was capitalize on highly athletic, undersized college defensive ends. When you do that, you get to draft Joey Porter in the 3rd round. When you have a lot of success doing that and you can constantly churn these guys out, high-level, dominant defensive players that are waiting for their opportunity to play while the other guys go sign for huge money elsewhere, you can continue to do that. But guess what happens? Every other team sees what you're doing, and they see how efficient that model is. So they mimic you. They start doing it. You saw Baltimore start to do it. They were a 4-3 team for a while. Then they got Haloti Ngata and really became more of a 3-4 team. Terrell Suggs adds to that. They're a dominant unit doing a lot of what the Steelers do. Belichick was doing this as well. In fact, Parcells and Belichick really kind of invented this when they were with the Giants, and they had Lawrence Taylor, not a defensive end, but he was used in that way, which nobody else really had done to that point in the NFL. Another dominant defensive team that won Super Bowls because of market inefficiency. Nobody else is competing with them for these kinds of players. Over time, though, everyone catches up. Everyone's starting to do that. Now, you're not, it's not even role specific. You can call it, they more or less play a 4-4 nickel in some variation of that. 12 players, 19 different schemes rotating in and out. That position, the quick twitch, high athleticism, edge rusher, whether he's standing up or he's down in a stance, the value of that position player is huge to every team. So what happened? Steelers can no longer get Joey Porter in the 3rd round. They got to take Jarvis Jones 17 overall because 5 other edge players had gone before him. There was nobody left. We'll save the Jarvis Jones rant, which is a tradition of mine every year, of how massively the Steelers screwed up evaluating that guy. Nothing should have been surprising what we saw. Nothing at all was surprising about his career. And they should have known that. They corrected things and started drafting not Jarvis Jones in the 1st round every year. It's intentional. Point is, market inefficiency led to the Seahawks dynasty. Nobody wants these freakishly long, huge defensive backs because they don't necessarily have the traditional traits that you look for in a defensive back. But what do? They went after guys with massive wingspans, certain athletic traits, and the most anti-authority, highly competitive people you could find. And then they stuck them in a room and made them compete against each other. And they went absolutely ballistic and destroyed the NFL for 4 years. That's the Legion of Doom. Earl Thomas, obviously a marquee guy. They traded up for Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas is a flat savage. The guy is insane, okay? He completely nuts. And they knew that. That's the type of guy that they wanted. You add Sherman to that, a converted wide receiver, an embattled one at high value in the 5th round. They added the Rhinoceros in the 3rd round. You bring all these guys together because the rest of the league doesn't want them. They don't think there's value. Seattle hit on a formula that said, we can find these guys later in the draft and they'll do exactly what our scheme does, and no one else is doing this. So we have our pick of perfect guys for our defense. And they won a hell of a lot of games doing that. That market inefficiency is shifting as it does every single year. Do the Steelers have a scheme? Do the Steelers have a philosophy or an idea that is going to allow them to maximize talent? What I really mean by that is getting all pro players late in the draft. It's not because people forgot about the player. It's not because everyone grossly underestimated how good they were going to be. There's some of that, sure. But what it really is we need this guy and nobody else does. He fits what we do perfectly. and nobody else will fit with him. We'll get into this in draft season. Just because a guy was taken in the 5th round doesn't mean that every other team overlooked his skill. Just they don't play the game that way. That's not their philosophy. He doesn't fit with what they want to do. So to me, what the Steelers have been trying to do for years is find that hybrid safety that can play inside and out. They don't, it's not that they don't value the outside cornerback, but clearly they don't in comparison to the rest of the league. They don't pay those guys much, okay? Ike is still like the highest paid cornerback in Steelers history. We won't count William Jackson, but they don't put a lot of money into that. They will find a bunch of cheap veterans who can play versatile roles. They also have tried to experiment with that safety position. And yeah, what a joke of a campaign that was. Do you remember that? They were painting Jarvis Jones up in roast beef. It's like, this is just grotesque. I absolutely hate Subway. I'm not sure if they're banging down our door to sponsor the new standard podcast.
I like, just as an aside, I like the bread, but man, they put their meat in microwaves. So
they put their meat in a lot of places. I don't want to know.
Pause. It's funny, like when you were saying Jarvis Jones, I think we have to bring this term to the show. BJJ and AJJ, when we describe all moves, like before Jarvis Jones and after Jarvis Jones.
Do a whole show on that.
Like that's a delineation of time. That was a BJJ move and an AJJ and after Jarvis Jones move. You know, the interesting thing is, and one thing I wanted to do for a show possibly next week, I know we haven't talked about it, but I'm going to just tease it here, is a show called Make Your Case for not necessarily a player to be selected in the first round, but a position. And I think you've made a very strong case for this hybrid safety type player that has the ability to be flexible enough to cover some tight ends, cover some backs, be maybe your number 3 corner, also be a complementary player to Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Exactly.
That type of player that can occupy various roles and play different positions, which is what Terrell Edmunds did. I mean,
except he wasn't good at it.
He was just average.
He couldn't cover inside. We saw that.
Yeah,
we talked about this during the season. I forget what it was. There was one play. Somebody help me out if you remember it. There was a play where he was lined up in man, I think twice in this game in the red zone on a tight end, and it's like he wasn't even there. It threw at him both times. He didn't compete. He didn't challenge it at all. That's not his role. He can't play man coverage like that. And I'm not saying that he should. He wasn't being paid very much. I know he was a first-round pick, but I think it was obvious he doesn't have those kinds of ball skills. Can they draft a guy at 17 that does? I think they can, because I don't think Joey Porter Jr. is going to be on the board. I don't think that kid from Illinois is going to be on the board. There are talented cornerbacks. We'll see what they do when they're on the clock. I don't think that value at those positions will be there. That said, getting back to market inefficiency, what if there is a guy that can do this inside and out? That's more of what they want. He might not be as high level, but he can defend a tight end in short spaces. I think that's kind of what they thought in Trey Norwood. Norwood fit that man scheme well. He played inside and out. In short spaces, he could battle guys. He showed that his rookie year. I don't know what happened to him in year 2. He mentally just kind of fell apart. He made a bunch of mistakes and kind of found himself in the doghouse. But I don't know if his career is over or not. But I do think that's the kind of guy they want to find. Do they want to invest a premium pick in it? I don't know. That's the part here that's up in the air. They need another cornerback. I know that. There's no way they're not drafting a cornerback. Could it be the type of cornerback who played, and this is very similar to the role Tomlin said Patrick Peterson's going to play, high and low, inside and out. He's going to be moved all over. And that largely is because he's not purely an outside cornerback anymore. They need to use him inside. I think that's where he can be effective to some degree. I don't think he can carry guys across the field, but he can play in zone just out of his savvy and his length. He can be effective in that way. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to find a cornerback, if you want to call him that, that's like that. Somebody that can perhaps grow a bit more to be a better inside defender than what we're probably going to see Patrick Peterson be this year. I think that's worth a premium pick.
It's going to be interesting. They have, and I'm excited for the show to make your case, because the more we talk about their defense and the more we're talking about it on their show, the pieces are kind of moving. It's kind of a shell game here. I think they have an idea absolutely of what they want to do. But it's going to be interesting to see. Let's jump into this question from Rob Cotting. What's up, Rob? Will Mason Rudolph come back to the Steelers if no other team wants him? I'm gonna just say, nah, man. Nah, man.
Let's dissect this, though. Okay, does any team want him? I mean, as of now, he's a free agent, still not signed. You know, we've seen a lot of junk quarterbacks get signed at this point. He's not one of them. Not getting signed before the draft. I don't envision a scenario in which either side would especially want Rudolph back, but I don't think the Steelers would mind. That's just a lot of money to spend for a third string quarterback. You're paying a lot for Trubisky. Rudolph wouldn't dress like he didn't last year. I think he would prefer to go to 31 other teams. So for that to happen, I'm couching that as much as humanly possible. I would say it's not likely that Rudolph would be back.
Let's jump into this question here. I think it's right here from Rod Young. Big up, Rob. Big up to everybody out there. Please like and subscribe to the program. If you had to prioritize the Steelers' top needs for top 5 positions, and we'll dive a little bit into this next week with the Make Your Case. Don't give away some of the stuff you may talk about next week on it, Neil. But prioritize your top 5 positions for the Steelers in this draft.
I think the real trick here for me is defining cornerback versus safety. I would say defensive back times 2. Those are the big ones for me. And I do think they also need to add an offensive tackle, if not for depth, then to cover up LaRaven Clark, who might just very well be the worst free agent the worst free agent player the Steelers have ever signed. They get the veteran exception with him, so he's not going to count on the cap all that much. Probably not even a great bet that he makes the team. But I had a scout tell me before he was drafted, I think he was drafted in 2016, was it? LaRaven Clark is the worst prospect in this draft. But he is going to be a mid-round pick because there just aren't very many guys at his size that know how to play the position even a little bit. I always remember it just because of how remarkably accurate he was. He got 3rd round picked by the Colts, a team that I believe didn't have a 4th round pick and probably needed a tackle because there aren't very many of them. You have to find these guys and you have to take them when you have the opportunity to do so and hope that they work out. Try to work them in. LaRaven Clark was a bad tackle in college. He was bad, like objectively bad. And he hasn't gotten any better as a pro either, in my opinion.
He went 3rd round. He was
a 3rd round pick. Yeah.
He was the 82nd selection.
Because he's huge. What's his height and weight? He's
6'5", 311.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
Around 5'16" at the combine. Graded out 57.2 overall, pass blocking 60.1, run blocking 52.1. He played 114 snaps last year.
Yeah,
he's definitely
65 pass rush snaps. He gave up 6 pressures.
Yes,
that's
gave
really,
up 6 pressures.
Really bad.
And gave up a hit and a sack.
Yeah,
so that kind of tells you. And it's, I mean,
oh, by the way, Dan Moore is still the Steelers' starting left tackle, as far as we know. So
I mean,
that's
and by the way,
right
I know this doesn't make any difference, but it's hilarious that a La Steeler is named La Raven. I mean, the Raven. I mean, it would just be incredible if he became very good and people Acrisure, Acra Hines were wearing LaRaven jerseys, the irony would be.
Yeah, I remember those jokes being made before he got drafted. And I was just like, I don't care what his name is. I don't want them to draft this guy. I don't know what they're getting out of it, but I think they can do better. And in this case, they literally could do better with anybody else in this draft.
LaSteeler, Raven, LaSteeler.
The honest to God hope, you have to fill a roster. You mentioned that before with the linebackers. You need 11 guys out there. So with Clark, you need 53 on your roster, and you need to have backup offensive linemen who have played the game before dressed, because you don't know what's going to happen. But it's not a good situation if he's getting in the game, if he even makes the team. There's no guarantee he's going to make the team. I think they'll draft one, and I think they'll cut him. They're signing him now to make sure they have
he's a
the
body
guy in case they can't. Yeah, exactly. He's insurance against the draft. They're going to draft somebody at whatever point. They might not be set on that yet, but so call it 3 then. Defensive back ×2, offensive tackle. This is an underrated one, and people freak out whenever this gets mentioned. But they need a wide receiver. Okay, it's Deontay Johnson is really in the last functional year of his weird ass extension. In 2014 or 2024, his contract's upside down, meaning his cap number is way higher than his base salary. So both sides are going to want to do something with that, and that might mean cutting him. It's possible. You can't rule that out. Trading him is an option as well. We'll see what happens. But as I've spoken of many times, people don't seem to understand how incredibly weird his season was last year. Nobody in NFL history has ever gotten 100 targets and not caught a touchdown pass. He had 149 targets.
Yeah, that was...
Nobody had ever caught 85 passes and not scored a touchdown. How many catches did he have last year? It's insane. It was completely bizarre. And keep in mind, too, in week 17, he got tackled at like the half-yard line somehow. Really unfortunate. I kind of wish that he was able to score at least once. But Deontay Johnson's a good receiver. I don't know how much they're going to want him back if he needs to get paid $25 million. I'm not sure they want him back for that. To set that up, you've got to continue to keep the cupboard stocked. And that's a strategy they've used. People are going to talk up and down about Calvin Austin, but frankly, no one on earth has seen Calvin Austin play in an NFL football game. Don't tell me he's a great player because he ran track and he had a great 40 time. We have no idea. No idea. Okay. George Pickens made some sensational catches. He's not a great receiver at this point. He doesn't run routes well. Very young. Okay. Keep that in mind. He played 24 college games. 12 of those were over his last 2 seasons. He barely played football when he got to Pittsburgh. A lot of work he's still got to do. I'm confident he'll grow, but there's a reason he fell to the second round. Okay. Some of that is the injury. Part of that, though, is the inexperience. He needs to learn a lot about the game. If you watched, what's his name? The kid from New York, the Jets who went to Ohio State. Garrett Wilson, you watch Garrett Wilson play, that's an NFL ready receiver. If you watch George Pickens run those same routes, Pickens is nowhere close to that. Okay. Not a bad thing. Just he's got to grow and develop. He's not there yet. I don't know how many young guys you want to put in that room, but we don't know what's going to happen in a season. They might lose the guy that's getting 150 targets a year. Who's filling that? Do they have that role figured out yet? I don't know. I think you need insurance there. You want Gunnar Olszewski catching passes again? He's still on the roster, by the way.
Shooter.
That's not a good thing. He couldn't even return kicks. That's what they signed him to do.
Shooter. Does he have a mullet as well? They have
probably.
They have 2 guys. They have 2 guys with mullets. And to your point, I mean, I always get ripped on Twitter because Twitter is a mean space, and it's hilarious that Edmunds blocked you. But hey, when you get blocked, that means you're probably saying truthful things. That point,
sure.
and I
was wrong. Bashed. Terrell Edmunds has taken less salary in 2 straight years, and there's no way in the world he's on that team next year. They're going to cut him for sure.
Oh yeah,
Philadelphia signed him for insurance. They're drafting a safety. Okay, that's Terrell Edmunds. That's the Terrell Edmunds everyone wanted the Steelers to sign. He signed for a tick above veteran minimum on the defending NFC champions who are going to draft a premium safety. So
because they lost their guy.
That's what the market Terrell Edmunds. That's what the market
guy?
told Terrell Edmunds.
What was the guy's name that they lost to Detroit?
CJ Johnson,
the safety,
the CJ guy.
Yeah, the 3-name guy.
Yeah,
the 3-name.
I'm terrible. Gardner Johnson. Thank you.
Yeah, Gardner Johnson. Yes, and so I'm gonna round out and give you after wide receiver. I'm going to say a defensive lineman as well. I think, and I'm saying that because in a past show we talked about last year is that these plans are like 5-year plans. Hayward is coming. His career is closing. At some point in time, you can't expect him to keep playing at that level of production at this advanced age. So at some point in time, I think you're going to see them go after their replacement. So we've got DB times 2, offensive tackle, wide receiver, and defensive tackle. And we'll make our cases for those next week on the show. So I'm glad that worked out that way, that we were able to get the 5 positions. But with that, I think we're going to go ahead and call it a show. And thank you, everybody, for hopping onto the program and joining us. And we're going to have more shorts next week. I'm trying to get Bainesy and Coulong to do shorts so he could talk about market inefficiencies in about 15 seconds on YouTube.
Did I not adequately demonstrate during this show? There's no way in hell I can talk about something for 15 seconds. You know what would end up happening? I would do like 8 of them. Bang them out in a row. That's because I recorded it and then cut them for 15 seconds each one.
Part 1, 2.
So what's the point? They're going to run pre-roll after each one. No one's watching that.
Bainesy and Coulong. Shorts are a world of their own.
I think it's great. It's just, why is it not a minute? 15 seconds.
I don't know why. I mean,
nobody's doing 15 seconds that are any good.
And this is a great way to end the show. Neil doesn't do quickies.
Oh, hell no. Hell no.
He's a,
as far as you know,
60-minute man.
I assure you, I've never heard that.
But with that, we're going to conclude the program. As always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.